So I was vacillating on this, trying to decide whether I wanted a belt loop that just rolls over or using clips. And then I realized, you know what, I'd rather just do a pouch, a simple sheath, if you will. Like a knife sheath, any kind of sheath. And I'm going to have pocket divisions for each tool. One for the Swiss tool, one for the adjustable wrench. It just makes sense. There's a reason why people do sheaths, because it helps protect the tool. It's a functional style or approach to housing a portable, everyday carry item like this. Now, this is going to be a little bit larger than your average sheath because it's going to be carrying an assortment of tools, what they call everyday carry tools, which have multi-functions that you can do with it. Whenever you're working around doing things, it's nice having that. I've just marked the little divisions in the center there where I'm going to be putting dividers with a pencil. That was the purpose of doing that. Now the other video was run because of audio and sounds. A landscaping company decided that doing a video right in the middle of doing a landscaping project right in the middle of my video was a good idea. Well, the other day it was someone cutting down someone's trees, so the whole time it's like timber and trees falling down and crashing against the ground. It's really hard to get good audio when you have, disturbances like that outside. I guess it makes for theater, but I'm not really sure if that's what I'm aiming for. Right now, I'm trying to measure out the distance for the little divisions in this pouch, and I figured about 3. As you can see, I'm making them about 1 inch roughly, and that's only because it's technically 3/4. The space for the largest tool is 3/4, but part of that is going to be the seam where it's going to roll over, and I'm going to lose about roughly 1/8 of an inch on the side. So 1/8 of an inch on each side adds to about 1/4, and that gives you about 3/4 inch clearance with the loss of the 1/4 inch on the seam itself. So that's why I was cutting those pieces to 1 inch. I made 4 pieces, 2 for the center, 1 on each side of the Swiss tool, and then 2 on the end. That's the basic approach for this, as I showed you there. So that's what I'm aiming for right now in this process. So right now I'm taking the little division pieces and I'm rounding the ends for all 4 of them, because it's going to be, and I'm not going to notch them this time. I used to notch the larger pieces, but these are the other pieces fairly thin. It should make that round without too much difficulty because of how thin it is. The larger piece of leather, you have no choice. You do have to notch it. But this is thin enough, it's not a problem. And I just used 1/4, as you can see. It's not a big deal. Used my nice handy-dandy Chinese knife there, and then I sanded a little bit on the edges. 2 of them are going to be in the center. You're not really going to see them, so I didn't spend a lot of time with them. The other 2, I'll be a little bit more careful on their appearance and their shape and how they're going to look overall. Now, I'm looking at this, I'm trying to decide, do I want to do all of it in the saddle tan, the way it looks right now, or do I want to do it in another color? And, that's one of the things I like to do. I like to do projects with at least 2-tone. I think the contrast is a really nice touch whenever you're doing something like this. Any more than 2-tone, and it really gets tricky, because you get dye that bleeds into other areas, and really hard to control dye. Dye just likes to spread, just like water. So right now I'm grooving the seam lines for those pieces, and then I'll go ahead and punch the stitching holes. Now I'm doing time lapse because nobody seems to want to watch the comprehensive video. I guess everybody's an expert. Good for them. I think that's awesome. If I can just offer an idea or two and someone's willing to accept it or like it, great. I appreciate that. More power to them. But when I started out, I watched comprehensive videos. I really liked when the experts spent the time to do an entire video showing everything, and then even sharing some of their tips and tricks, because that's one of the biggest challenges of doing this kind of work, is finding clever ways of doing things to save yourself a lot of hassle. Like this work here, I wish I could do it with a sewing machine. I ended up having to get rid of that sewing machine, just wouldn't do the trick. Kept locking up on me, and as you saw in the one video, like every 20 or 30th stitch, I had to stop it and start over again, and that's just no way to do a project. That's one of the reasons why I do the smaller stuff instead of the larger stuff, like bags, because you really need a sewing machine for the bags. The larger stuff like that, it's an insane amount of stitching by hand. In fact, that's why I've been working on the one bag for my father, and I still haven't finished it yet, because it's like every time I do something, it's days of stitching. Anyway, I'm almost finished with the fourth piece here. There you have it. All the stitching holes are in place. And they're going to be 2 for the outside, 2 for the inside. And what you'll do is you'll stitch along the straight. And I count holes to figure out how long to make the lines. That I find is the best way to do it, if you go by the holes. Because if you try to measure it, it's really hard to measure the round, as I call it. The half circle area. But the stitching holes are very uniform for the most part. And it gives you a really good sense of how to measure a line for something like this. First thing I'll do is I forget what the term is, skive stitching line, and then punch the stitching holes along the edge of the project. That gives me a place to work with. And as I said, I figure about 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch for the edge whenever I'm stitching something like this. That's about how much space it takes up. You got to calculate that in. If you don't, you're going to make something where things don't fit, whether it's credit cards or just everything under the sun, you know. So I know there's a lot of people that use those rubber mallets, but honestly, this tool was free. Bought it at a yard sale for a few bucks. And I just don't have the money to buy an expensive rubber mallet. So I'm stuck using this crappy old metal hammer. And one of these days I'll start replacing stuff if I ever get any real money. So you can see there the flap's a little bit long. I'm going to have to trim it. So what I'll do is I'll figure out where I want to cut it to, and I'll count the holes and then do the same distance on both sides, and then I'll run a line across. Now I'll run a line and cut right to the edge of a hole so it looks like it was meant to be that way. And now I've got the flap roughly the right length, which is what I'm shooting for. And I'm marking the lines for the center now. They're not going to be uniform because these items aren't the same size. The little EDC wrench is the thinnest item, and the ratchet with the bits is the largest item, width-wise. And unfortunately, as you can see there, what I did is I counted all the stitching holes on the division pieces, and I literally count up to the place where those holes will take me to. And then I mark both sides, draw a line, and I know that's how far I need to go for those stitching holes. So I'll draw a line crossed. Then I'll draw the line from where I made the original mark for the division pockets and draw that to the other line, like so. Since I'm going to be stitching along this, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see the lines. That's one of the reasons why I don't worry about it. Now I have the 2 lines for the division pockets. And I'll punch the stitching holes all the way through the distance of those lines. And if my calculations are correct and I counted those holes correctly, then when I stitch those holes in place, it will end up roughly dead on to the length of those pieces. That's about the best way I know of to calculate something like that. So there you go. I've got the stitching holes for the pocket divisions in place. Now I'll do the, now this isn't necessary. I don't really need to do stitching holes here, but I like to do stitching on the edge. It just looks a little more uniform. There's a synchronicity to it that I appreciate. So I do that anyway. And I'll do it on the other side too. It gives it a more finished look. Originally when I had done this project, I was thinking of doing the lacing, but you think it takes forever to stitch. Lacing the edge of something is about 4 times as long. Literally. It's insane how long it takes to lace something. And it doesn't really provide any real benefit other than it looks a little nicer. So I went ahead and just said I'll skip it on this one and just pick it up on another one. If I do one of these to sell, I'll probably do the lacing. Or I'll do the lacing on it and realize I prefer to have it and then sell the one I made for myself. That's what I'd probably do. At some point, I'm going to end up doing patterns for these and making them available if you decide you want to make this stuff. I'm having issues with trying to work that out. Now I'm calculating the clip here. I'm going to be putting a clip on each side. I was going to do a belt loop. I just didn't like that. I had to cut the loops and try to fit them perfectly. And a clip it's really nice being able to slide something on a belt versus having to slide a belt through it. And the way I'd use something like this, I would rather just slide it onto the belt than have to constantly push the belt through it. So that's why I went this way with the clips. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp these rivets in place and get this taken care of after I punch the holes, of course. Okay, those are the holes for the clips on the back, in case you're wondering. Now, there's this issue of buttons, trying to figure out what to do with the buttons. What I should have done is I should have, at least on the 2 pockets on the side, I should have centered the buttons. I didn't do that, and I wish I had, to be honest with you. But normally I like the buttons to be a little closer to the edge on both sides because it helps with keeping the flap in place on the edges so your edges don't catch everything. That's the reason why I did it this way. But it doesn't look as nice this way, to be honest with you. Partly because the Swiss tool in the center has that little extra metal clip, and I have to offset the button in the center in order to avoid that. So it looks a little off as a result, unfortunately. But I don't mind. It's the one I'm doing for myself, so I don't care. So there you go. I've just punched those buttons. Now I'll do the other ones by putting all the tools back in place. I'll put the flap where it should go, roll the flap over, and then I will literally mark the holes with the flap in place. That's the best way I know of to position a buttonhole. And I know people use templates, and templates are a great way to go if someone knows how to do that well in a pattern. But if they screw up their pattern, or you use leather that's too thick or have some other kind of variance, you can find something that actually wouldn't fit. So there you go. You got the basic pattern. I've got all the holes and stitching and buttons done. I appreciate you watching.